Good morning, everyone, and a particularly special welcome to those of you who are dialing in, as it were, to hear LinkedIn. We're also simulcasting to YouTube, and a very big welcome to the 8th episode of the Beers Live. It's sponsored by UMO Finance, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. See you in a moment. Okay, so the show today, as I said, this is the Biz Live. It's a new accredited show from LinkedIn, or to LinkedIn, as it were, not from LinkedIn, they won't like that, but supported by our friends at LinkedIn. And we are one of the lucky few at the moment in the United Kingdom to be streaming live to the platform. And as I said, simulcasting to YouTube too. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello, but please do like, comment, and subscribe using the bell icon if you're getting value from today. We're starting to build up that new YouTube channel. And for those of you watching onto YouTube, please do introduce yourself, even though we love live, into the chat today. Please let us know where you're dialing in from. A couple of weeks ago, we had Mark Colburn, who is a Paralympian, and we were having people leave comments and ask questions from all over the world. Also, LinkedIn will restream this show directly after we finish at around about 12:15, 12:20 p.m. GMT today, straight onto the platform. As far as we know, it's up there forever. And you can continue to like and comment as well. So our guest today, coming up in a few minutes' time in the virtual studio, is Stephen Davies, who is fresh off the BBC One national news, or the BBC national news just on Friday, talking about business. He is the CEO of Penderyn Distillery, but there's so much more to it. It's a tourist destination as well. It's a well-established brand, and we are going to be talking about brands. A big shout out to our friends at UMO Finance. Thank you very much indeed to Mark Watts, the principal there, and all the team for making this show possible. Through your sponsorship, we're able to invest in critical equipment, lighting, all the sort of stuff we need, from laptops to microphones, which enable us to stream live on this amazing platform. But it is intensive hungry in terms of processing power and audio quality. So we've done lots of practice runs before we started 8 or 9 weeks ago, and here we are. And thank you so much to our sponsors, DCW Group, Mark Watts at UMO Finance. And then in 2 weeks' time, we will be welcoming a brand new sponsor for season number 3. We did it. I'm very, very pleased. So thank you to our sponsors for making this show literally possible, and for also supporting us and encouraging us as well. So once again, our guest is Stephen Davies. If you're just joining in now, this is the Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze. I am your host for today, and here's a little logo, because we can. Please do introduce yourself into the chat. Let us know where you're coming from, what your business does. This is an interactive show. Let's call it a business networking opportunity. And if you know the Biz Live and you watched a few episodes, Ian Porter, where are you? I think he has the record for watching more episodes than anyone else, to the best of our knowledge. If you are watching, let us know what you do, where you're coming from, and also please do connect with other people who are commenting and introducing themselves into the chat. It's quite a mouthful today. We've got quite a bit to get through, and I'm very pleased to say my co-producer, dear friend Sarah, and also the co-host of the show is here, and she's going to tell us about the talking point and this week's theme. Sarah Brooks, hello. What is this week's theme, please?
Well, good morning, Jamie, and good morning to everyone tuning in. So last week, obviously, the first thing I need to say, Jamie, is that we're still here, aren't we? We've made it to December, which
we have made it.
Is pretty good news. But obviously last week we spoke to Will Garley, for those who tuned into that, who was telling us about brands that he's developed, such as Danone and Cobra Beer and Tropicana. And we had a fantastic gallop through all of that. And this week we decided to carry on with that theme and dive a little bit deeper into it, and look a little bit more forensically at what it takes to develop a global brand with, as you say, the chief exec of Penderyn Distillery, Stephen Davies. So it should be very, very interesting. Of course, he's developed the international brand of Penderyn Single Malt Whisky. Don't mind if I do. So we're looking forward to that. And today's talking point is going to be how to develop a specific brand. So Stephen's got some things to tell us about that. So we're looking forward to some insights on that one. And our talking point today, Jamie. Well, last week we looked at brands that we liked, and this week I would like everyone to think about and share in the chat what their top 5 brands are that they're relying on, that they're having faith in at the moment during lockdown in England, and generally under our sort of more restricted kind of measures. What are the top 5 brands that they rely on? I'll tell you what mine are. I just jotted them down before we came on air. So Apple, Google, Waitrose, Amazon, and Argos. When you've got a 10-year-old like I have, Argos is a very useful place to rely on. So those are my 5. So I'll leave that with you and see what you think.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah Brooks. So please do let us know your 5 favourite brands, and also why, if you like, in the chat. Let's get the conversation going. And I would please like to invite you all to give Sarah Brooks, who's now done 8 weeks with me. That's quite incredible to put up with me for 8 weeks, 8 shows. They're roughly about 58, 59 minutes each. We don't watch a clock, but they are about an hour. If you're enjoying the show right now, please give us the little hand with the little red heart going up in the air. If you could do that for us, we'd be most grateful. There is a 15-second latency, but I hope to see a few of those coming up. Give us a thumbs up as well if you like. Keep us going for season 3. Let's see a few of those hands and hearts come up. Let's have a little looky. I'm going to look at the live stream. There we are. There's some clapping hands. There's a purple hand with a red heart. If you're enjoying today's content and you get value from it, please do subscribe on YouTube. But also make sure you're here in 2 weeks' time, because we will be having our 9th episode. And once again, if you're just joining, a big shout out to UMO Finance, who helped make this show possible. They're doing so much behind the scenes. We've invested in lots of equipment which we need to do live streaming, and so much more. So thank you to our sponsors. And again, our guest today is Stephen Davies. Stephen, as Sarah said, is the CEO of Penderyn Distillery. And I just happened to be watching the BBC national news in the United Kingdom, of course, but it streams to the world. And on Friday evening, just doing a little bit of last-minute work, catching up for today's show. And then up pops Stephen Davies being interviewed. So I'm going to have to interview Stephen about what he was being interviewed about, because it was really interesting. Sorry, BBC. I had to poach a few of your questions there, no doubt. Okay, Sarah, that's it for now. You're going to go off and moderate the questions. Thank you very much indeed for your help. Lovely to see you. See you in about 20 minutes. I'm going to ask some questions to our guest today. So, Stephen Davies, please give us a round of applause, a little hand with a red heart, everything you can to welcome Stephen Davies into the room. Hello, Stephen Davies. How are you?
Hello. Good morning. How are you, Jamie?
Very well. So, for those who are just joining us, you are now watching The Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze. This is Stephen Davies. See you in a few moments' time. Excellent. So welcome to the show, Stephen Davies. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you for inviting me along. I'm delighted to be here.
I feel very lucky to have you here today, because I don't know much about the distillery business, or indeed I like a glass of wine at Christmas, a wee shot of whiskey perhaps, but I'm fascinated to discover some of the photographs. Of course, you're a member of the Evo network, from which the show is born. Of course, you're a member of the Evo Wales 7 group, so thank you for your custom as well. But I think it's I wanted to sort of talk to you today, to start with, maybe for the first few minutes, a little bit about your past. I mean, did you always, it's a strong word this, but dream of owning a distillery? And could you actually tell us what a distillery is, if you're a bit of a dumb like me? I'd love to know, because I don't fully understand. I know it involves big capital equipment and you make alcohol, but tell us a bit more about what a distillery is and a bit about your past.
Okay, yeah, well, my father introduced me to single malt whisky. So when we talk about whisky today, we're talking about single malt, which is one part of the sort of whisky world, not the biggest part, because the biggest part, it tends to be blended whiskies, which are very high volume and tend to be mixed rather than drunk on their own. Not always, but mostly. But single malts, I was introduced to them, I guess I was about 17 or 18. My father had a taste for things like Highland Park and the Macallan, lovely sherried whiskey. So I kind of got the bug from a fairly early age, I suppose. Not, just really having a little taste. But I was struck by the elegance of the spirit. It's a very, single malt whiskey is a very civilized drink, I think. And you could tell just from tasting it as a very unsophisticated 18-year-old that I wanted to know more about it, because I didn't really know what I was tasting. I didn't have a clue. Mm-hmm. And so I got an interest then. But then, of course, I went off and did something completely different. And I went off and studied geology in university, and then became a buyer. My first job was a graduate trainee buyer with British Steel. So, I'm from Port Talbot, so the steel industry is kind of home in many ways. My mother, my father, my aunts and uncles all worked in the steel business in some shape or form. And so I started as a buyer, and then I kind of jumped into what you would call business-to-business contracting, again in steel and open cast mining. And I learned a lot about business then. So I spent about 15 years learning a lot about business, a lot about contracting, a lot about making relationships and how to build business, and really business growth has always been the thing that I've been into most of all. But then, of course, the opportunity came up to join Penderyn, and it kind of, I'd always had this sort of malt whiskey connection. I loved various single malts from Scotland. So it's been a kind of a very interesting way of getting into the business. But then suddenly I was confronted with knowing a lot about business in general, but not knowing much about branding. So the big challenge for me was getting into branding. To answer your second part of your question, in terms of what is a distillery? Well, it's basically the way we are set up now, and the way most distilleries set up. The first half is a brewery, because to make good whiskey, you need to make a good beer, or what we call a beer wash. Mm-hmm. And we ferment that. So we ferment that to about 8% alcohol. And then you distill off that to make the spirit. And the distillation process is taking a beer wash with a fairly low level of alcohol, low volume of alcohol, and concentrating that alcohol into a much smaller volume. So you're making obviously a stronger drink. And then you're going to mature it after that. In the case of whiskey, you're going to mature it in wooden barrels for a number of years. But basically, you start with brewing, then you move into distilling, and then you move into maturation, and that's basically it. But the only ingredients you've got are barley for single malt and water, and then you use yeast to ferment and everything. But it's two ingredients basically.
The we think about whiskey, and I certainly do. I think about it very much as a kind of, I still think of it as a luxury brand. Okay. Is that correct? Is it something which is reassuringly expensive? And secondly, is it something which there's huge demand for abroad? I mean, what's the kind of the balance of home business in the UK versus international trade?
Yeah, I always think that if you look at the whiskey market, the pricing on whiskey is quite elastic. You can buy pretty good whiskies in the £20 to £50 range, but then whiskey pricing goes up to hundreds of pounds and then hundreds of thousands of pounds if you've got a very old rare whiskey that people can't get hold of. So it's very much in the premium and super premium categories, and it's very much an export product. I think a lot of distilleries in Scotland would probably export 80% of what they produce. For Penderyn, it's more about, we're actually quite well distributed in the UK, so a lot of what we produce goes into the UK market. We're at the moment about 30% in export, and those exports go to 40 different countries. But the Scotch whiskey industry primarily has created a market in many places around the world which are quite sophisticated for whiskey and sophisticated for single malt. So I think it's, in terms of the economy now and looking forward, creating a whiskey industry, for example, in Wales is great, because the whiskey industry in Scotland is worth £4.5 billion a year. It's massive.
£4.5 billion a year. Do you know what the have you got some figures for what the sort of how Wales, what's the sort of looking for Wales there? Is it £1 billion business yet?
No, because at the moment we're the only commercial distillery in Wales. So we're a sort of a turnover of about 60 million pounds. So we're small. We employ about 50 people, but in 15 years ago, we were the only license for a distillery in Wales. There's now something like between 25 and 30 licenses in Wales. So I feel that we've been the catalyst for hopefully is the embryos of a new whiskey industry or spirits industry. Let's not just talk about whiskey, because a lot of people listening will be gin drinkers or vodka drinkers. And as you know, there's a huge sort of surge in gin over the last few years, which has been very exciting. And we have a brand called Brecon Gin. We sell a lot of Brecon Gin in the UK and in Spain. So yeah, it's about, for me, it's about, you can suddenly see that the opportunity for building a great export industry is there.
I want to talk to you a bit about the future of Penderyn shortly, when I'm asking questions from the house. But I do want to remind people that if you are just tuning in, we have Stephen Davies with us. This is the Biz Live. It's an interactive show. We would love for you to introduce yourself into the chat. Let us know you're here. Network and connect with other people who are dialing in. I know from the guest list that there's a number of people who registered to take part today from abroad. Some of your customers, no doubt, Stephen, and some of your suppliers as well, I would hope. So please do know in the chat if you are taking part in the live, and if you're watching on the restream on LinkedIn or indeed on YouTube, please also do comment. And if you're getting value from today, please do like, comment and subscribe, as they say, to YouTube content creators. So Stephen, I haven't been to Penderyn. I hope to, and in fact, not I hope to, I will do, especially as a customer. But it is something which is fascinating. I understand that Penderyn is actually one of the key tourist destinations in Wales. So tell us about the Penderyn experience when you go into it. What will you see? Will you see casks and oak barrels? Will you see lots of machinery? What is it like if you're visiting as a guest? Build a picture. I really want to understand what it's like. Are you in a very rural, rustic setting? Are you in the middle of an urban area?
We're right on the edge of the Brecon Beacons National Park. We're just inside the park. So the village of Penderyn is in a really lovely rural location. And it's about 25 minutes drive from where I live on the coast near Port Talbot in Baglan. And it's quite a small footprint. It's not a huge distillery. But the nice thing about when you come to see us is if you do the tour, then you get out onto the shop floor. So you get to see what's happening. And for us, we receive the grains of barley, which have already been malted for us, meaning that they get soaked in water and then they start to germinate and then they're dried. And that's the malting process. And then we crush that grain and we ferment it in something called a mash tun. So the first thing you see is the mash tun, TUN. And we mash about 5 times a week. And we're creating this beer wash, or this sort of unhopped beer at about 8% alcohol. And when the first thing that strikes you when you walk into the production area is the beautiful smell. You get quite a nice light, sweet smell from the barley and the fermentation of the barley. Because what we're after, the first thing we want to do is we take this sort of beer wash, add 2 different types of yeast to it, and we ferment it for about 3 days. And we're trying to get a really light, fruity wash. We make a very light, fruity whiskey, fruity, creamy toffee fudge. And so it all stems from having this quite light, delicate sort of beer wash in the first place, and getting the fermentation right. So you see the fermenters, or the washbacks as they call them in the industry, and the fermentation goes on for about 3 days. So there's always one fermenter which is at a particular stage, and then the others would be further along. And then we take that and we put it into the copper stills. And one of the nice things you'll see is the beautiful sight of the copper. Copper is very important in our process, by the way. You cannot make great whiskey on stainless steel stills. You've got to use copper, because the interaction of the copper with the spirit helps to produce a very light and a very acceptable, flavorful spirit, and it takes out some of the unpleasant things that would be left in if you didn't have the copper contact. So the ratio of copper to the spirit in the stills is quite an important thing. So you see this beautiful copper, and it goes different colors. Where it gets really hot, you get a very dark copper color. Where it doesn't get so hot, you get a slightly pinky copper color. So you notice all these things as you stand around on the mezzanine floor. But you do start to feel quite hot as well, because these stills are like big kettles. So it can be, especially in the summer, it can be quite a hot and slightly uncomfortable experience. It's a little bit more welcoming in the winter. And of course, that affects the flavor. That affects the flavor of the whiskey as well. So making whiskey in the winter and making whiskey in the summer can be a little bit different.
It's a strong brand, Penderyn. As you said, you're leading the market, as it were. And I didn't realise you were in the Brecon. That's beautiful. I love to go walking there. For those of you outside of the United Kingdom, it's a very beautiful rural area of Wales, and famous for many peaks. And Sarah and I have in the past spent a sort of a work day up there. I think it was on New Year's Day, actually, with the family. It was magnificent to be in the Brecons. So a lovely place to be. We're talking about brand today. So you're an expert. You developed this brand. How do you develop a specific? And thank you everyone for your chats. Keep asking questions for Stephen, because Sarah is going to fish out a few really great questions in about 5 minutes' time. So please, if you've got a question to Stephen, please do ask them. This is a really great opportunity to ask somebody who's spent years developing a brand. So how do you develop a specific brand? What is the process, Stephen?
Well, taking our example of single malt whiskey, the first thing you will notice about any single malt is there's a really high level of authenticity. A big emphasis on the source of origin for that brand. And so our whiskey is called Penderyn, and we are from the village of Penderyn. And malt whiskey drinkers, they really like to know the detail of what goes into the brand. So they want to know what shape your stills are, where the water comes from, and in our case, the water source comes from a natural spring underneath the distillery. They want to know what barrels you use, what wood. They want to know everything. And building our brand, putting our brand together, is having to put that together in a story that is interesting, engaging, and gives us, I think, some significant points of difference. And so for Penderyn, the point of difference that I would really point everybody to is we have these very unusual whiskey stills. Most brands of whiskey make, or malt whiskey, they use pairs of what we call pot stills. But Penderyn has a single copper pot still, which is unlike anything else you'd find in Scotland or in Ireland or maybe in Kentucky. Very unusual, produces a different style of whiskey. And if you're used to drinking whiskey and you taste Penderyn, you would instantly say, hang on, that's a bit different, I'm not going to tell you it's better or worse than Scotch, but it is different. So in terms of building our brand, I think we had to get that story and the detail of that story right, because we know that our customers, I don't think vodka drinkers, for example, would worry about that level of detail, because most people who drink vodka maybe don't want to taste the spirit in the way that whiskey drinkers want to taste. So, it's horses for courses, and you have to know. Then once you get beyond that, one of the things that made it very, very, I think has made Penderyn successful is the combination of the taste of the liquid in the bottle, but also the design. And the people we've been working with on design, I feel very privileged to have worked with them, because they've created some fantastic designs that are part of the brand, part of the story. And we didn't want to, you're talking, we can go back 15 years now, but we didn't want to look like Scotch whiskey. We didn't want to be seen as, they're trying to copy these guys, because Scotch whiskey is done so beautifully well. We wanted to occupy a slightly different position in the market. So we went for innovative design, and we went for more modern design, and we went for imagery that was, uniquely Welsh as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a combination of, working with really good people. I always say to people, Penderyn is very much a team effort, and I'm very privileged to lead the team. And, I say my skill is more on the business development side, but then you get a very strong appreciation of brand when you work closely with these guys, who all actually, in our case, have got some sort of Welsh connection. Some of them lived in London and they wanted an excuse to come back to walk in the Brecon Beacons on a weekend or whatever. They love the connection, and it's not just rugby or football; it's whiskey as well. So yeah, it's a combination of elements that have come together for us. And then it's been about going out and talking and tasting at a level. We started with farmers markets, with the Royal Welsh Show, with the National Eisteddfod. You've just got to get out there and get it in front of people, because you haven't got the marketing. We didn't have the marketing budget to really do it on a big scale. So we really started with grassroots, get out there and talk and taste. And now these days we're doing the same thing, but we're doing that in Paris or in Beijing or in San Francisco, which is great, which is good fun.
We're going to touch on Brexit and no doubt the COVID crisis as well. I'm sure Sarah will come in a few minutes with some questions. I see a few from Adrian Edmonds and others. People are commenting a lot about the Brecon Beacons here as well. Mahmouda Hill says, I've been there a few times and have to organise a tour, so that's really good. Maybe we'll bump into each other there, but it sounds like a really beautiful place to visit, and the brand is very much associated with your history and heritage. How long has the distillery been around for, and what are your plans for the future? I know there's some expansion.
Yeah. So the distillery first made whiskey on the 14th of September 2000. Okay. And that was the first time that whiskey had been distilled in Wales for over 100 years. Right. So there was a big gap. Now, some people on the call, if they're interested in whiskey, might have heard there were a couple of brands back in the 1980s. One was called the Prince of Wales, and the other one was called Soonamore, in Welsh, Sound of the Sea, which were claiming to be Welsh whiskey brands, but they were actually Scotch whiskey, which had been sort of imported. And unfortunately, the guys who were involved in that, they were closed down by the Scotch whiskey industry. So there was no proper whiskey for 100 years. And then, it took us probably a good 10 years to really get traction and momentum on the brand, because you're talking about a matured product. You cannot sell whiskey until it's 3 years old. And then you can legally label it as whiskey, but actually you probably want a few more years age on it as well. So we've been distilling now for 20 years. We opened the visitor centre in the Brecon Beacons around about 2008, which was great because that's allowed us to bring people in. And so we've established ourselves as a manufacturing company and as a tourist attraction in the area. And now looking forward, the main priorities for the brand really would be exporting, because as I said earlier, we're exporting about 30% of our product. I'd like to see that a bit higher. I'd like to see us up to maybe 45 to 50%. Not diminishing the UK market, which has been absolutely brilliant, and especially during the COVID crisis has been a real lifesaver for us. But we've also got a plan to build 2 new distilleries. We've got one new distillery in Llandudno, which is opening next March, and is looking great. I was up there last week, and the construction work is going on, and it's looking beautiful. It's in an old boys' school, just off walking distance from the seafront in Llandudno, which is a beautiful old, Victorian seaside resort. And then in 2022, we're opening another site in Swansea, which will be a working distillery in the old copper quarter in the Morva Harvard Copper Works. So we've got
copper seals and literally the copper mine.
Well, the most interesting thing about that is that the guy who designed our whiskey still is a guy called Dr. David Faraday, and he's a descendant of the famous Victorian scientist Michael Faraday, who studied copper smelting on the very site we're going to be working on in Swansea. So we're going to have some great stories to tell when we get onto that site.
It's funny. It's a brand which really feels, from your description, from what I know, as a company with a huge heritage brand. But as you say, you've been around since 2000. Not a bad thing, most businesses don't get past 1 year. So tell us, if you could tell us just briefly, and I know you're on the national news just on Friday on the BBC. Yeah. Tell us a bit about how COVID has impacted you, and also your thoughts about Brexit being something which is traditionally, there's quite a high tax levy on alcohol, isn't there, and whiskey. It's something the Chancellor often talks about in the budgets. Whiskey tax, people go yay or nay. Tell us a bit about those two things, and then we'll go to some questions, Sarah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, so in terms of COVID, obviously, I think like everybody else, the first 6 weeks of the crisis were very, very scary. I was very fortunate. I was invited to do to an event in Downing Street for St. David's Day, and we were stood there. The Prime Minister, we presented him with a bottle of Penderyn, and then a couple of weeks later, everything had changed. And we were worrying, our export markets closed down, our travel retail business had gone, our tourist business had closed down. So for about 6 weeks, it was kind of what's going to happen next. Things then settled a little bit for us. We're nationally distributed with people like Tesco and Sainsbury's and Waitrose in the UK. So all of the places that were open. So once they got themselves organised for toilet rolls and soap and everything, they started to sort of replenish the shelves and things settled a little bit, and we were very fortunate to have that sort of UK business. We turned our hand to making hand sanitizer for because you just couldn't get it anywhere. It's probably not the best or cheapest way to do it, to make hand sanitizer from single malt whiskey, but we were supplying the NHS in Wales, and people were all pretty grateful for that, and we were very grateful because it was business, and also we were able to give some to charity and to some of the local care homes around Penderyn and Hirwaun and Aberdare. So that helped us through a little bit. And then I guess by about July, things started to sort of wake up for us with export markets again, and gradually those things have been good. So it's been a very mixed picture for us. But the tourism business has been stop-start, open and shut, and then we learned yesterday that we've got to close again. So that's kind of a bit of a concern. And this period now, as you'd expect, would be fairly busy for us because you've got a lot of people coming. But fortunately, the distillery shop is still allowed to be open because it's still deemed to be essential. So that's okay. So yeah, it's been a very mixed sort of picture, but every day has been different, Jamie.
I'm glad to hear that you're surviving, and as we say, it's an adage now, of course, but you're thriving, which is good. And I'm sorry that you've had. So,
to answer the second part of your question about alcohol duty, I mean, not to maybe paraphrase Michael Caine, but maybe not a lot of people know this, but if you buy a bottle of our whiskey at £38, £10 of that is alcohol duty.
Did you raise that with Boris Johnson when you met him a few weeks ago?
Yeah, well, we raise it whenever we can. But it's the same for everybody in the industry because it goes on the percentage of alcohol. But it's an enormous tax and a good source of revenue, obviously for the Treasury. But it is what it is, and we try to encourage that to be certainly not to go up and try and keep it in check as best we can as an industry. And of course, if you're exporting, then you export duty free, and then you're subject to the regimes in other countries, but the UK tax regime is one of the highest around.
I think we'll come to Brexit a little bit more in a moment. And just before I come to Sarah, I just wanted to ask you, not a pre-planned conversation, I hasten to add, as you know, and you've been in business for years, from the steelworks to business development. You work in the Welsh. You work for Welsh, the probationary service, I understand as well. You're doing lots of different things. There's lots of different businesses on the call today, and there's many who will be watching subsequently, as I said. What 2 or 3 tips could you offer to businesses at any stage in their life, as it were? You know what I mean? To be able to do what you've done, to be able to hang on to their growth plans, because these plans aren't changing from what you've said. This is difficult. This is taking a sideswipe at many people's plans. Understandably, there's an international pandemic and people are sick and unwell, but you're also making sure that you continue to do your payroll. You've got 50 members of staff and you're thinking about growing. This is really great news, as Paul Harris said just there. And it says a great development for Wales. So what tips would you offer businesses of every shape and size who are taking part today?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing from a business growth point of view, the one thing I've always kind of tried to focus on, obviously, is customer and customer relationships and not losing customers. So, our first relationship with Tesco, for example, was in 2006. We are now national with 600 or 700 stores. A lot of people say to me, well, why do you deal with Tesco? It must be really hard. Well, like all the supermarkets, it's challenging, but we've been able to grow with them and, give a bit back and keep working with them. And I think with all customers, you've got to show that commitment and try and hold on to it's all about long-term relationships for me. It's all about customer service. And when I was in the steel industry, we gave 24 hours, 7 days a week, customer services. And so you were at the mercy of the customer there any time of the day or night. And so, high levels of customer service, high levels in our terms now with the brand, super premium brand, it's got to look great. It's got to feel good in the hand. It's got to taste good. There's got to be an attention to detail. So I always think it's that attention to detail that has got us through. And I feel, going forward, we've been lucky to come through the pandemic as we have, but we've also been investing through it as well. So I've taken on 2 people, one in Asia, one in the UK, for business development at a time when, yes, it's a bit of a risk, but I kind of felt if we were going to get out of this and come out of it strongly, we needed to be prepared. And so we've been investing as we've been going through, really. I think that's important. You've got to take a long-term view of business. And of course, with whiskey, everything you do is long-term because nothing really happens in a hurry.
Sure.
But it's it's good. It's good to have that that 5-year plan. Keep revisiting it. In our case, maybe 10-year plan as well. And it's very important to have those longer term, the sight on the longer term.
Great stuff, Stephen. Thank you for sharing these pearls of wisdom. And we've got some questions coming. I'm gonna thank you for now. I'm gonna bring in my colleague Sarah just after this small interlude. Hello there, Sarah. So tell us what's been going on in the chat. What's the mood? What's the brands that people like? And what's the questions for Stephen?
Lots of love there for Wales and the Brecons, Stephen. So yeah, lots of people want to obviously visit you when when they can, when it's safe to do so. So you were just talking there, just to pick up on what you were saying about focusing on the longer term. Of course, everyone wants to know, what do you imagine will be, because you don't really know, I guess, the specifics, or maybe you do, of Brexit for long term to you?
Yes, gosh, yes. If only I knew. Yeah, I mean, our major export markets include France and Germany, and so the big priority for me is making sure that we have continuity after the 1st of January. And some of the uncertainties we're dealing with at the moment are around presentation and labelling of our goods. Because at the when you're inside the EU, it's not a problem, but when you're outside the EU, somebody has to be responsible in the markets you're exporting to. We don't have one partner in Europe. We have one partner in pretty much every country, and that's the way we set it up. That works well for us because we can pay more attention to detail with those individual importers, but it means having a different label for every country and a different bottle and presentation for every country, and that's a bit of a concern, because then you lose a lot of the efficiency that we previously had. Yes, we worry about how easy is it going to be to cross the channel and get things into market in January, although in truth for us, January and February being the new year, it's quiet months for alcohol. We're actually in a bit of a frenzy right now. It's been an incredible sort of trading period through November. But we do worry about being able to have continuity of keeping the product on the shelf in market. So there's a number of things that hopefully will be resolved in the next couple of weeks. What I would say is we export to 40 different countries. So long as we know the rules of exporting, we can do it. We just need to know the rules, really. But outside of Europe, people have asked me a lot, are we excited about the new opportunities? Well, we already export outside of Europe. I'm not really sure what those new opportunities are, except perhaps for us, somewhere like India. If there was a free trade agreement with India, which is a big whiskey consuming market, but currently has tariffs of about 180% on import. If we could remove those tariffs, I think it would be interesting, not just for us, but for the whole whiskey industry. But there's no sign of that at the moment. So as for the USA or Japan, we're already there. So I'm not really sure where the opportunities lie. So I'm kind of looking around and seeing if we can find those new opportunities.
So got another question here. Obviously, you're marketing, as you say, all over the world, and you mentioned how important the UK market is. Where is most of your marketing effort focused?
Well, in the UK, a lot of it would be with the UK supermarkets, because we are very well distributed with them. But abroad, it would be France, Germany, the USA, places like Taiwan, where malt whiskey is really well understood. And that takes the form of, we employ brand ambassadors in France and Germany, and we employ a team of 5 or 6 brand ambassadors based at Penderyn. And in normal times, those people would be out around the world right now doing shows and events and doing what I mentioned earlier, really talking and tasting, getting out and meeting customers and hand selling the brand. We're not Johnny Walker Black Label. People have not so much heard of Penderyn, and they probably haven't heard of Wales either. So, but then the upside of that is you've got a great story to tell. But you still end up, there's nothing better than somebody with a Welsh accent standing on a show in New York, and they say, you're an island off Scotland, are you? And we say, no, we're not. We're a different country. But
Stephen, do you have a? Sorry to interrupt. So I'm really keen. I'm sure everyone wants to see an actual bottle. Do you have a bottle to hand by any chance?
I have, but I'd have to disappear to get it. I can pull one up if you like.
Yeah, do you know what? It'll be a first. Why not? I'll bring Sarah.
Okay.
So Sarah, I've seen we've got some questions here about Brexit, and Susan has said, Susan Elia Yates says some great ideas to explore the Asian markets as well. That was interesting, and I think they've developed a really good brand. I'm really keen to see the actual bottle because I've not seen a bottle of it before.
Yeah. We'll have to scour the shelves of our supermarket, won't we? But I love this idea of hand selling the brand. I've not heard that phrase before. Have you?
No.
It's a good one. So I wonder if Stephen is in earshot here. Do you think he is, or do you think he's actually
I think he's gone off to get a bottle. We should actually start running a competition or a prize, shouldn't we? Win a free bottle. It would be great.
I liked what Stephen was saying about the authenticity, the importance of the origin of a brand, and obviously he's got a brilliant story there about the how he's in this village and they've called it after the village, and there's a story behind all of that, and the idea that malt whiskey drinkers just love the details. They like to penetrate into the details of that, and I'm sure you can extrapolate that actually, to other brands as well. People like the details. The story has to be consistent, doesn't it?
Yes.
People have to know that what they're buying has that sense of it comes back to authenticity, doesn't it? Found that really interesting, and also finding areas of distinction in your brand. What differentiates you from the other people in the market. Really interesting. Well, here he comes. He's got his bottle. Brilliant.
There's a question there. There's a question which has come in here, Steve, from a participant called Richard, and he says we've seen a seismic shift from alcohol-fueled social occasions to at-home consumption during the pandemic, an opportunity for some, less for others. So his question is, how do you compete with the big boys when the on-trade is essentially closed?
Yes, it's a very, very good question. I say, fortunately for us, we kind of built our brand mostly in the off-trade. We're very present in the on-trade in Wales, but one of our ambitions is to grow a little more in the on-trade in the rest of the UK. But so being quite sort of strong in the off-trade right now has helped us greatly. I think if it were the other way, we'd be in a lot more difficulty. So I think that is something that has kind of really helped us a lot. So this is a typical bottle of Penderyn Single Malt. This is one of our more premium bottlings, rich oak. But just to show you in terms of, I mentioned the design, the diversity of design. I mean, look at this. That isn't something you'd expect to see as malt whiskey. This is to celebrate a guy called Bryn Terfel, bass baritone opera singer.
Yes.
As part of our Icons of Wales series. If you were to be able to feel this now, it's got a lovely velvet, feels very tactile sort of bottle. Okay, so that's very nice. And then again, in terms of design, this is called Rhiannon, again from our Icons of Wales series, and it's a story from the Welsh Book of Tales, the Mabinogi. And look at this. This was done by an artist called Andrew Davidson, who does wonderful sort of artwork. So it's always trying to really bring the creative art of making whiskey, but also the presentation and the design of the bottles. It's all very, very important to us.
This is very beautiful. Could you bring back that first bottle? That was extremely, very different from what I know. I mean, that looks like something you go into a very, I'm just freestyling here, a very, very modern London hotel, let's say for argument's sake, and they would be serving, really posh spring water from it. It's really beautiful, very, very simple. And then juxtaposed against this velvet textured, unbelievable. If you like to see, please do make a comment in the chat. We'll bring them up on the screen. There's Richard, who responds and says, fantastic. I hope you're saying that to the bottle. And then there's Barbara as well. They are works of art, and she is a very well-known photographer. So there's a bit of
most of this work was done, pretty much all of it was done by a guy called Glenn Tetzel, who was from Barry, and an absolute honour to work with the guy over many, many years. And we work with his daughter as well now, Lauren, and she's producing some of this stuff. So, but big part of the success of the brand, there's no doubt about it. And I remember when we first started showing these designs to some of the buyers, and they would say, this isn't traditionally whiskey. You know, what is this? Is it a bottle of wine? I say, no, it's not wine. It's actually single malt. It's a much heavier bottle than wine. You can see the glass is quite thick on the bottle. It's we've got these beautiful glass wings. So it kind of shakes things, it does shake things up a little bit. And what are we going to do? We're not going to sort of fake 100 years of authenticity. We haven't got it. We're not going to try and look like we're Scottish, because we don't want to be a Me Too copy sort of brand. So we had to find our own direction, and so that's what it's really been all about.
Great. Well, look, I think we've got time coming up to the magic 12:15 as we are in a few seconds. We've still got time if you're okay for a minute or two. So, are there any last questions that we've got in the chat from our participants today? It is an interactive show. Thank you for everyone who's chiming in. I think we've got time for one last question, Sarah.
Yeah, okay. So from Adrian Edmonds, do you feel the international brand of Wales is a positive or a challenge?
I think, very much for us, being a Welsh brand is a huge positive. And I do feel that we're representing Wales. Inevitably, you do when you travel in the world, because rule of thumb, if the country doesn't play rugby, then they've never heard of Wales. I mean, it's as simple as that, I'm afraid. But I think for us, it's a really great positive, because it gives us a lot. We call Wales the undiscovered Celtic country. We call Wales the land of legends. It's a massive opportunity for us to tell stories, and malt whisky is all about telling stories. I do think Wales lacks premium brands. I think we could do with a lot more. If there's any budding entrepreneurs out there, I think there's the huge opportunity to create premium Welsh brands. But I've certainly found it to be a great advantage to be able to, talk about Penderyn in the context of Wales.
I can see literally, if I look over to my left, your right, I can see Wales. I can see the tail end of the bridge.
Yeah.
And though I'm over here in England, it's often struck me how amazing everything from. I know you were a geologist, if I remember originally. You studied how different it is over here, and let's just say the coastline of England facing over towards Penarth and Newport and Mega and so forth. How different the geography suddenly becomes from the edge of the English coastline to the beginnings of all the way to Sugarloaf and so forth. It's extraordinary that there's just this tiny bit of land separation with some water, and here we are. And of course, you benefit from the beautiful waters of the Brecons as well. And can I just confirm? You may have said it, and forgive me, I'm multitasking a little bit. The water of the Brecons, for which you are, if you're just joining in, Penderyn is located in the edge of the national park in Wales. That water goes into primarily, you don't get, I know it sounds ridiculous, you don't pipe in water from other parts of the world or anything like that. It is literally Brecon water, which helps.
Yeah, we have a natural spring, which is underneath the distillery. Where we are in the Brecons, it's Carboniferous limestone, and then that's overlain by glacial gravels. And so the water, it falls as rainfall, and we get this sort of lovely natural double filtration through the gravels and through the limestone rock. And then we draw that up into the distillery, and we use that for our mashing, for our casking and our bottling operations. So yeah, it's all local water that we use. A lot of people say, how important is the water in making whiskey? And to be honest, you just need good, clean water, and you need to balance the water sometimes so that because this doesn't have a shelf life. This product can go on forever. You can buy this, open it now, it'll still be as good in 10 years time, in 20 years time. But you need to have balanced water so you don't get anything precipitating, calcium precipitating out, that sort of thing. But the Scottish industry has done such a great job of telling everybody that water adds to the flavour and does wonderful things to the whiskey. I wouldn't want to really, take that illusion away, perhaps. It's an important part of the story. And we've got good, clean Brecon water. So it's nice.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to throw back to Sarah just for her passing comments before we say goodbye to you, Stephen. Sarah, any last thoughts about brands today? We covered history, heritage, a whole new thing I knew very little about. And I'm sure we've all learned about the distillery business here, and obviously a beautiful location, which is clearly a must-go-to tourist destination when you're able to reopen safely. So, Sarah, some last thoughts from you.
Well, as Stephen was talking there, the liquid itself is long lasting, and there's a whole story invested in that liquid. But I like the way that once you've got the liquid sorted, it's all about that bottle. And those bottles, I think we were all very, very, kind of impressed by those fabulous bottles, and also the diversity. They're obviously for different markets. So it's fascinating to see how that one liquid can become a completely different product, if you like, in terms of what it looks like when it goes to different markets. So I found that really fascinating. They look beautiful. I think everyone's really looking forward to getting over there, Stephen, and having the Penderyn experience when they can.
Do come and see us. We'd love to see you as soon as everybody's able. We're doing a lot of online events, and I'm doing a whiskey and rum event on Thursday night. We've got a new rum brand called Siddiqui Rum, which is it's not a Welsh story, but it's a story actually that originates in the Middle East. We're doing a tasting of whiskey and rum on Thursday. We do online whiskey events. If people want to join, it'd be lovely. It's not just the different packaging, but the different colors of the whiskey. You get all the colors you get through the whiskey are natural if they've been in sherry barrels or port barrels or in bourbon barrels. So you've got this wonderful array of flavors and colors, and it's a wonderful sort of assault on your taste buds, really. And people think whiskey a lot of people say to me, oh, I got drunk on whiskey when I was very young and I can't take it. And that would have been a very cheap blended whiskey, I'm sure. But if you start with the malt whiskey, you'll see the variations in flavor are astonishing.
It's so funny you should say that. I'll need to leave out some details here. But when I was very young, there was a village fete. I grew up in central London. We had a kind of a village community where I lived, and I kept winning the tombola. I wasn't, gaming it. I just kept winning the tombola, and people standing there going, why is it every time he wins? And I won a bottle of whiskey. And I won't say which decade it was, but it was a long time ago that kids could win a bottle of whiskey. And I may or may not have had a wee dram, as they say at one point, and felt very, very unwell. And of course, that was my first experience. Why is it that people's first experiences, I think it's because it's the long shelf life, I think you referred to. It's knocking around in homes, lying around. I'm sure, people, that was my experience anyway. And
whiskey has an allure. It has some strange allure, I think. And I wish I had £1 for every time somebody told me that kind of story, because I hear it so often. It's incredible.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed to Sarah Brooks. Sarah Brooks, thank you very much indeed. We will see you in 2 weeks' time, Sarah Brooks, or I will speak to you probably in a few minutes' time, because we have EVO's annual Congress, so which of you are coming to, Stephen? I know that, thank you. Yeah. It's a huge, big, one long networking event tomorrow. We have it twice a year, and we've got 3 great speakers, about 200 attendees at capacity. Can you imagine if you do a Zoom call, having 200 people onto a Zoom call for just over 2 hours as well? So hunker down, because it's going to be quite right.
Sounds very exciting.
We'll see Sarah there. So firstly, goodbye, Sarah Brooks. Thank you very much indeed. We will see you in 2 weeks' time when we have a new sponsor and a new show and, of course, a new guest. So thank you very much indeed, Sarah Brooks. And then coming back to you, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Sorry for overrunning very slightly. I know your time is precious, but I just wanted to say on behalf of all of us here, for those who are watching now here, can we have a little hand with the little heart going up? It would be really nice if we could have a few of those. And also, can we have a thumbs up? And then if you've taken value from today and you've enjoyed it and you're watching on our new YouTube channel, then please do like, comment and subscribe. It will help us game the algorithms, and who knows, maybe we'll be welcoming you once again. There's no way of subscribing here on LinkedIn at the moment, but if you would like to add me as a connection on LinkedIn, usually when we go live, or a subset of my followers or connections will get notified as well. So Stephen, a big thank you to you today. It was lovely to see you on the national news, speak on behalf of the industry and Wales, of course. We wish you the very, very best of British luck in the new developments into the new year and into 2022. It's great to see that you're standing your ground, you're continuing with your new distilleries opening up, and a business which is now 20 years old. Is it your 20th anniversary this year?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was 20 years last September. So it's a real landmark, which we couldn't really celebrate, but we're there. So it's great.
Well, you know what? If anyone can celebrate, there's a famous expression, you could organise a da-da-da-da in a distillery.
Really. I think after 20 years, 20 years, I finally proved I can do it, Jamie. So, yeah.
So as the team says, we look forward to seeing, hopefully, well, we'll see you tomorrow, Stephen, at the EVO Online Congress. If you're interested in EVO networking, please do go to our website. It is evo-networking.com, and there you will find a meeting to visit between now and Christmas. And it is free to attend if it's your first time to the EVO Online. If not, it's 10 quid plus a booking fee and a bit of the old VAT, which Stephen was talking about earlier on, though we are not taxed at the same rate as we find that whiskey is, as we discovered today when it comes to importing and export. But thank you again, Stephen. It's been wonderful to speak to you. On behalf of us all. It's been a great show, and I just want to say farewell to you, Stephen, and then in order to say a proper goodbye to our viewers, I must draw your attention to our sponsor, UMO Finance, who are also co-sponsoring the Evo Online Congress tomorrow. It is a members only event, but there's still a chance to apply today, and who knows, you'll be accepted. You can come along with us and network your hearts out with lots of people in the southwest of England and Wales, of course, with which Stephen is a member of that wonderful group called Evo Wales Seren, which is Welsh for star. So thank you again to everyone. You have been watching The Biz Live. In 2 weeks' time, we will be coming back after a short sabbatical to reset, and we'll be welcoming a fantastic studio guest once again. We've had 8 shows. We're really pleased with that. About that. If you'd like to see us come in again at 2 weeks' time, it will be on a Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. GMT, and we have a brand new sponsor. The managing director, or the principal of that business, was on the chat today. His name is Adam Rooks, and his company is called Professional Apprenticeships. We are so grateful to all of you for taking part. Big thank you to UMO Finance for supporting us for the last 4 weeks, making the show possible. We're really grateful. And to all of you, from me, Sarah, and of course Stephen, it is a farewell for just 2 weeks. Have a lovely rest of the week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.